All right.
on the calendar invite. I think I heard a phone ringing. No?
Not
Oh,
for
that's
me.
probably it was probably on my end. I'm at a little free co-working space,
Okay. All
so
right,
there
then
may
we'll
be a
just
little background noise.
ignore background noise. Yeah. All right, here goes. Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel, we have Steve Edwards.
Yo, 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 coming at you from a way too warm Portland.
I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. I'm too far west for that big cold storm, but it's still cold here.
Well, it's maybe too warm, man. Our snowpack sucks.
Yeah, our
I've barely been
snowpack
able to
has
get
been-
any skiing. It's just awful.
Yeah, same here. People are worried about water. I live in Utah. If you're not aware, we have a special guest though this week. That is Valery Karpov. Do you want to introduce yourself? I know we've had you on before, but just remind people who you are.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Val. I'm the maintainer of Mongoose, popular ODM for Node.js and MongoDB, and I do freelance web development. I'm based in Miami, Florida, which is much colder than expected. I had to turn on the heat for the first time, as I was telling Chuck. First time turning on the heat since I moved to Miami about 7 years ago. The
That's
last couple
brutal.
of days.
Yeah.
I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, my son's on a mission for the church in South Carolina, and yeah, apparently people don't deal well with the cold there either. So
Yeah, well, not used to it. I mean,
yeah,
I have never seen Miami. I haven't seen Miami break into the 30s before. This is it's been a while.
yeah. I was accused of not teaching him how to drive on the ice, which I know isn't true. So anyway, let's dive in. Let's talk about Mongoose. I'm assuming that people have some idea of what it is, and I really want to get more into, features, functions. It seems like a lot more adoption of AI. Where does Mongoose get us from there? But just kind of set the stage to get us going. Like, what is Mongoose, and at a high level, what does it do for people?
But at high level, it's like an ORM or ODM in NoSQL land for Node.js and MongoDB. So it provides you like the M in MVC for
Right.
working with MongoDB. We recently released Mongoose 9, big breaking release, first major release that we've had in 2 years. Got a few cool new features there. And then we're also working on a Mongoose-centric MongoDB GUI called Mongoose Studio that we'd like to take some time to talk about. And then, yeah, if there's something else that you want to talk about, we also are we've been working on a kind of a plugin with the DataStax team. I guess now they're IBM that lets Mongoose talk to Apache Cassandra via DataStax's data API. So those are kind of like 3 topics that I think we can discuss related to Mongoose that are a little bit newer and a little bit less of the standard Mongoose stuff. If you want to talk about kind of high level what Mongoose is and what it's about, we can talk about that, or we can talk about one of those kind of 3 new things that are going on.
Yeah, I think like ORMs and, or in this case ODMs, which I'm assuming D stands for document instead of relation, are probably pretty well understood. And I'm assuming that you provide a lot of the standard features you see from other ORMs or ORM like libraries. So let's dive into the new features. And if people want to learn more, they can go pick up. I think we've had you on before to talk about Mongoose, and so they can probably go find an older episode that gets into the fundamentals of what Mongoose is.
Yeah, I think I've probably been on JavaScript Jabber at least 4 times in the last 12 years, give or take.
Yeah, we did views on Vue twice too. I was just looking that up.
Yeah. Oh, I might need to do views on Vue again because Mongoose Studio also is built in Vue, so that could be a fun little thing.
Oh, is
to
it
talk
really?
about.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
unfortunately, I'm not doing that
I do
podcast anymore, but so we can talk about it here if you want to. This is where we try to squeeze in a little bit of Vue and JavaScript here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's something we can talk about too. Yeah, I pretty much all of my software are developed in Vue these days. Unless I'm working for a client that has a strong front end preference, I use Vue.
Cool. Okay, Chuck. So what are we talking about? The new stuff in Mongoose?
Yeah. Sorry, my headphones died on me.
Uh-oh. So what's new and exciting in Mongoose, Val?
So Mongoose 9, it's less about kind of like flashy features and more about reducing long-term friction and specifically to TypeScript. I think one of the major changes that we made was before we had it so that functions like find, which is the general way that you execute a query to load some documents in Mongoose, the TypeScript types there were very permissive and just let you pass in whatever you wanted. For Mongoose 9, we made that more strict and made it so that we have explicitly strong types for what parameters you can pass into a query filter. The advantage there is twofold. I mean, one that helps TypeScript catch typos and whatnot, and for developers that don't use TypeScript very much, like me, it helps with autocomplete, because before the fact that it just gave you the fact that the types were just any object goes into find, that meant that tools like Visual Studio Code couldn't figure out like what are the properties that you should autocomplete. So now you actually get nice little autocomplete drop downs for query filters. And the other big thing that we added was like full async stack traces support, in the sense that Mongoose was originally very callback heavy. We introduced promises support in 2014, 2015. And now with our last release, our previous breaking release, Mongoose 8, we got rid of the user-facing callback support in all but one important case. And now in Mongoose 9, there's no more user-facing callback support. It's all async await, which means you get async stack traces, which is great.
Okay, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. So what do you mean?
Yeah.
Trying to understand that. So I'm always big into debugging and being able to get traces, or I'm more of the breakpoint debugger type of person whenever possible. So what's an async stack trace as compared to the alternative?
So if you've worked with stack traces in JavaScript, you've probably seen things like process next tick and rejection or list.on timeouts. Those kind of stack traces where you just where the stack trace doesn't show you the actual calling code.
That could be a problem.
You've gotten probably a few of those. And the reason for that is the async nature of JavaScript, right? When you pass a callback into like a set timeout function, for instance, you're losing your call stack when set timeout calls the function that the callback function that you passed into set timeout. If that function throws an error, you'll see a stack trace that includes node internals that say, okay, I'm calling in on timeout. You won't see your code that actually called the set timeout. And this was especially problematic with callback-based code, because callback-based code, runs asynchronously, right? So you don't see the code that actually called whatever function is getting the callback. And that made debugging Node apps a nightmare for a very, very long time, and basically made every stack trace a murder mystery.
Yeah, in other words, you're getting everything but what you want, right? Getting all the
yes,
clutter.
exactly. You're getting all the node internals, and you're not getting your own code.
Oh, yeah.
With async stack traces, it's pretty sure, async stack traces is like a V8 feature, so it also works in Chrome. But the idea is that if you're calling async functions all the way down, even if the actual error is asynchronous, you still get the full stack trace of the async functions that you called. So let's say I'm in an async function called A. I call an async function called B, which calls an async function called C, which has a timeout and then throws an error after 5 seconds. The stack trace for that error will include A, B, C. It won't include like the node internals for on timeout or whatnot.
Well, that's really handy.
Yeah. But the trick there is you need to make sure you're calling async functions all the way down. So the instant that like somewhere in your internals you start calling something that's callback based or call a set timeout, you're going to lose the async stack trace, and then you're back to where you started. So the work there for Mongoose was to get rid of all of our callback based internals. Pain point there was one of the primary ways that you wrote Mongoose middleware was using callbacks, specifically getting like you would say schema.pre save. You would get a next callback, kind of similar to Express middleware, where you would call next in order to kick off the next middleware in the chain. We had to remove that in order to properly support async stack traces all the way through.
Gotcha. So is there anything you have to do specifically to get this to work, or you just upgrade to Mongoose 9 and then you're good to go?
Yeah, upgrade to Mongoose 9. Any plugins or middleware that uses Next needs to be rewritten. Thankfully, hopefully that's not too many right now, but yeah. But in the age of AI, it's much easier to refactor this sort of things.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit less concerned. Actually, that was pretty much like my first foray into AI code generation a long time ago was refactoring some of Mongoose's callback based code into into using async await. This was probably, I want to say, early 2023. So this was like before Cursor or anything where you could easily select a bunch of code and pass it into OpenAI. What I did was I wrote some code to basically parse out some of Mongoose's test suites into individual tests, and then would pass those tests one by one into OpenAI's API and tell it to refactor this into async await based code. And even back then, it did a really good job. Got like probably 90% of the test suite done. And it took me. It was the whole project of refactoring all the tests. Like we have thousands of tests, and I was working like 8 hours a day for several days straight trying to refactor all this. And then I just was like, I need a tool for this. This is getting insane. So I tried OpenAI, and OpenAI did a great job of it. Made it a one-day project as opposed to a multi-week project.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say that I've used some of those same kinds of features for a number of things, just to increase my test coverage, or hey, I need to rework this, or rethink that, or even add a feature. And yeah, it does a pretty decent job. Usually I have to go in and refine a handful of things, and I have to look over the code and make sure it didn't do anything stupid. But it's amazing what you can get done with AI these days.
Yeah. The other about a couple of weeks ago, I gave a demo of some new map features we built in Mongoose Studio. And one of the things that I demoed was the ability to just so I have one of my clients has a region model, right? It's a region is like a geopolygon for defining just like a region where they have operations. You draw a polygon on a map that represents Dallas, and this kind of represents the boundary of what the company's operations thinks of as Dallas. So creating new regions can be annoying because, well, you need to figure out a way to get all the GeoJSON points. But I demoed a way where you just tell AI like, hey, create a region representing Boston. And while it didn't do a perfect job, Mongoose Studio, you still need to go into Mongoose Studio and drag the vertices around. But like the AI just like basic models already know off the top of their head like where like the approximate latitude longitude of Boston, Massachusetts, or Boise, Idaho, or pretty much any major city. So like things, you can do a lot of really amazing things or amazing seeming things with models that are just off the shelf if you let them, and they do a good enough job to at least get you started.
Yeah, if you give them a function that'll let them talk to the internet too, sometimes if they don't know the answer, they have enough context to go and look it up somewhere. And so that's
Yeah.
the other piece to that I found is, okay, here's how you make a call, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what is Mongo Studio?
So Mongo Studio is a GUI for MongoDB that's a little bit more higher level than a traditional database viewer. It's got we're trying to make it one more schema aware in the sense that so in MongoDB or MongoDB GUIs typically don't have a notion of a schema, right? Because MongoDB
Right.
doesn't really have schemas by default. But Mongoose, you do have a schema, and that lets you fill in things like autocomplete and auto-suggest. So like auto-completing field names when you're typing in the UI input or filter input for the UI. We're also adding a bunch of AI elements in the sense that you can good concrete example. When you want to create a new document in your database, there's like a nice button you click to insert a new document, right? And then you get a code input that lets you enter in. Okay, I'm going to create a document with these properties. But that can be a little annoying to type out manually. So we also have an AI input there where you say, okay, let's just ask the AI to generate a document for me right there without having to go anywhere else. And that's kind of how the Boise, Idaho region example worked. I just, instead of typing out the entire all the details for the Boise, Idaho region, I just have a quick little AI input that already has the context of what the schema definition is for this particular document, as well as what the user is asking. Create me a region for representing Boise, Idaho. And then the AI just goes in and generates the output. The user confirms or rejects and can edit it a little bit extra themselves and clicks create. So there's that. And then we're also working on things like MCP server. So if you have a production deployment, you'll have an MCP server that you can connect Claude to that lets you do controlled code sandbox access. Like you can let Claude have, say, read-only access to your production data, or access to write certain collections but not others, for a little bit more security.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, and we're seeing this more and more, right? Where people are integrating AI into their setup, right? And whether it's taking user input, so the user essentially is chatting with the AI system, or at least giving it some kind of prompt. Or sometimes I've seen folks just basically say, the LLM is going to do a good enough job if I ask it to do this job, that I don't actually have to write explicit code and cover all the edge cases and make sure that it does the thing that I need it to do. And so both of those scenarios sound really, really helpful with something like Mongoose, where you can essentially say, all right, here are the credentials for getting information from my data, or here's how you query my data. And then effectively then it has much better information to go off of to solve the particular problems that my system or my app is solving.
Yeah, exactly. With Mongoose, in addition to having your schema definition, we also have access to things like methods and statics that you define on your models.
Oh, right.
So that means that Mongoose Studio can be aware to some extent of how you write your code and how your application works. So like it's a more application-centric, more developer-centric database GUI that's meant to help developers do their jobs and be less kind of DBA-centric, which I find a lot of other database GUIs to be.
So does it just send a list of available functions to Claude when it, kind of like MCP, or it doesn't have to be MCP. Sometimes you send a list of functions.
So for cases like the create input and the chat tab, places where we have AI inputs in the UI, there we call out to either like the Gemini API or the ChatGPT API or the Anthropic API, and we pull the context like we have we have internal storage that stores just descriptions of the user's models, including the bodies of statics and methods, including the schema definitions.
Okay.
So that data gets passed over there. For the MCP server, what do we do with the MCP server? Well, there, I think what we pass back is more along the lines of like a TypeScript definition of what models are available.
Right, and then it just comes back and calls into whatever it needs in order to do what it needs to do.
Yeah, exactly. With the MCP server, what we're experimenting with is kind of like a code sandbox, effectively for the LLM. So like the way that our MCP server works is more along the lines of here. The MCP tool is here, execute this code in your sandbox.
Right.
And the AI just kind of gets the context of like this is what's available in the sandbox. So that's what we're experimenting with. Trying to figure out how that can work. The other option that we're thinking of is almost like a CLI tool. That's something I've been debating on Twitter and debating back and forth with myself as to whether I go the MCP route with Code Sandbox or whether I just have like a CLI where the LLM can use a CLI to do stuff.
Yep. Makes sense. Steve, do you have anything you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I've been doing some searching. Where's the Mongo UI? I keep finding, or the Mongo Studio, what you call it, because I keep finding Studio 3T instead of any links for.
On the website is mongostudio.app. And
okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, all one word, no underscores or anything.
Yeah, I keep forgetting about these new TLDs we have. Right.
Yeah, and this is is this something that I can host on my own? Oh, I see in your video example on here that it's got a .vercel.
Yeah.
So it looks like you can deploy it out to wherever you need.
Yeah, exactly. We support Vercel, Netlify, and Express right now. So if you have a Vercel deployment, you don't even need Next.js. Come to think of it, if you have a Vercel deployment, you can just host Mongo Studio as a sidecar alongside your existing application. Or you can just run Mongo Studio for local usage. And you still get mostly all the features. I think a couple of things that are missing are we don't support dashboards for local development, but we do support kind of like the basic database viewer and the chat tab. The chat tab is our kind of like a ChatGPT interface for generating scripts that execute in the Mongo Studio Code Sandbox. And I think that the chat tab also addresses like one limitation I've seen with MCP, which may not be as relevant after last week when they announced MCP apps. But before MCP apps came out, like about a week ago, there was no way for MCP to really generate like non-trivial UI. So one of the things that I wanted from the chat tab from the very beginning is the ability to generate scripts or to generate charts and maps from natural language. So the ability to say things like, give me a chart of users created by day for the last 2 weeks. Being able to do that is what the chat tab is good at. But MCP did not really have any meaningful way to do that up until very recently. So we're figuring out how to do the MCP app side.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just looking at this and thinking to myself, I typically use a relational database, but if I were using MongoDB, I mean, having something like this just it makes it easier because you get to the place where being able to visualize a lot of this stuff, it allows you to think about it in a different way rather than being stuck in your CLI or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd be surprised how many times like a bug is difficult to spot when you're looking at a traditional kind of like rows and tables database GUI, but the instant you look at a chart, you're like, oh, that's a bug. Yeah. I actually spotted like for one of my clients, I spotted a bug that was costing them thousands of dollars just by, I put together a quick chart. I look at it, I'm like, there's an extreme outlier on this chart. What's going on there? And yeah, would have never caught that if I hadn't looked at that one chart. And on that chart, you just look at it, it's like, yep, that's glaringly obvious. Something is wrong there.
So
Well,
when I was
hopefully they're
working,
paying you on commission on those bugs, right?
right.
Saving thousands of dollars a month, they have to pay you 10%.
Yeah. Oh, if I caused the bug in the first place.
So
Maybe.
when I was working with Mongo on Atlas, so I used like an app GUI called Studio 3T. That was just what my
Yeah.
company had used. How does Mongo Studio different from that? Is it just that it's web based versus like a separate app, or what's the differences between those two?
A couple of things. Web-based is one big thing. For production deployments in particular, we like to have Mongo Studio as something that you log into through either Gmail OAuth or GitHub OAuth instead of passing around connection strings. So one of the things that we've seen that small medium businesses do is they like when a new engineer joins and you want to give them production database access, we just send them like a shared credential or a shared connection string in Slack, and then ask them to hook up, put that connection string in their Studio 3T. And that can be, that's a little bit insecure, shall we
Dicey.
say. Yeah, dicey. Yeah, it's, yeah, what you should do is at least have a shared or a separate connection string for each individual developer so you can easily onboard and offboard people. You should rotate it probably once every year at least. But nobody does that because it's tedious, it's a thankless job. Just everyone finds it inconvenient and annoying, so nobody does it. With Mongo Studio, we do things a little differently in the sense that you deploy Mongo Studio as a web application, and then people log in via GitHub or Gmail. So if you onboard or offboard someone, they lose access to they're no longer part of your GitHub organization and they lose access to their company email, then they're automatically removed from Mongo Studio as well. So those are two big differences: the production deployments and the web-based side of things. Another big thing is being Mongo-centric and knowing about your Mongo schemas gives you access to things like schema level autocomplete, where again, Mongo Studio knows that your users have a first name property. Studio 3T doesn't necessarily know that. It can infer it from the shape of existing documents, but it's not going to be 100% accurate that way. Another detail is like we're trying to make Mongo Studio a little bit more higher level and a little bit more developer focused in the sense that we want to show data less as rows and columns and as plain text, and more as the data that you want, the data that you actually want to see in a useful way. So, for example, for things that look like GeoJSON, we actually have the ability to show the GeoJSON points as maps.
Nice.
So if you go into looking at a particular document and it has like a GeoJSON polygon or point, you can actually click to show that on a map. A couple of other visualizations that we're adding is for image fields, we want to actually visualize or have the option to load this as an image. And then for vector data, that's something that we're getting working on. It's pretty cool. Is showing a projection of the vector data, or at least making it easier to visualize a bunch of vectors just in your database UI.
So I'm assuming you can also view the data in its raw format, right? In your
JSON the raw format is the default, but if you want to just quickly look at a GeoJSON data point on a map, click a button. Don't even have to leave Studio, which is
nice.
Is a frequent pain point for me. I've been working with GeoData and MongoDB for a long time, and just having that all baked into one database GUI has been huge. I no longer have to worry about. What I used to have was I had like a script that would take in latitude, longitude points and just give me a Google Maps output that I could copy, or a Google Maps URL that I could copy paste into my browser to view where this was, or to view where a point was. And then for polygons, there was pretty much nothing. I guess I could generate like a Google Maps does have like this static image generator, so that's what I would probably use. Was I would just take a polygon and just generate a Google Maps image from a script. But that was inelegant and inconvenient. It's much easier to just, I'm already in the database GUI. I click a button to view on the map. And again, a nice little leaflet map that I can edit, drag.
That was my next question. I was curious to see what library you're using to generate your maps if you're not using Google Maps anymore.
No, it's leaflet. For Google Maps, I was talking more about their Google Maps has like this API for generating static map images, which is actually really useful.
Yeah, if you just want like a screenshot of a map or a one-time view as compared to something that you can zoom and pan and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or if you want something that's easier to share in a place like Slack that will support the full Google Maps experience, getting the image is very important.
So what's coming next for Mongoose or Mongoose Studio?
For Mongoose, we're probably going to have another breaking release this year. We will see about exact timing and scope. But it's going to be our Mongoose 10 release, so I want to make sure that there's something interesting in there. I just haven't settled on exactly what I want, but one thing I want is more of a switch towards using proxies internally for change tracking as opposed to object.define property. Kind of going more along the lines of how Vue does change tracking versus how Mongoose does change tracking right now.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds a lot like Vue.
Like that. Yeah. Vue and Mongoose have a lot of similarities internally in terms of the problems that they try to solve. Again, one of the core parts of Mongoose is change tracking in the sense that you load a document from the database, you assign some properties to the document, and then you type save. Mongoose tracks the changes that you made and only sends the changes that you made to the database as opposed to trying to write the whole document.
So now where is, I was going back and listening to snippets from past episodes like 2020, 2021 on Views on Vue where we were talking about Mongoose. So I know Dino's, has been around for a while, a few more years since then. Is Mongoose compatible with Dino?
Yes, it is. I think we technically still have alpha support for Dino, and we have been testing on Dino for several years, so I think it's reasonably stable. But I haven't really used Dino very much, to be perfectly frank. So like I am not sufficiently confident, and I haven't seen enough interest in using Mongoose with Dino to justify kind of saying like, hey, this is like an officially supported thing. I'm seeing more usage for Bun, so I'm kind of curious to tinker with how Mongoose works on Bun, but haven't had time to work on that either.
Now is Bun? I heard about Bun and see it listed. Is that more just a runtime, or is that something you would write apps in, like you would Node?
From what I gather, yes, you would write. You would write applications in Bun. I've heard of some interesting app frameworks that are specific to Bun. I think there's Alicia JS, something like that. I think that one is. I think that one is very Bun specific, and I've heard very good reviews about it. I think one thing I liked when I reviewed Alicia, I'm going to. Sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation. One thing I really liked about it that Express does not support is Alicia has good support for server sent events kind of right out of the box. So if you pass it in, it gives the developer experience that I've always wanted for server sent events, which is you pass in a async generator function, and then whatever your async generator function yields, that gets submitted as a server sent event, which is really cool. Love that. We actually use that pattern in the Mongoose Studio backend as well. But yeah, one UI decision that we made probably a couple months ago in Mongoose Studio that has paid huge dividends is like traditional database viewers, you frequently load query results in pages. So you would, so if you execute a query, you get 20 results back. You get, or there's, let's say you execute a query and there's 40 results. You typically get 20 results at a time as a page. But the query, but when you execute the query, you don't get to see the results one at a time. You wait, the GUI waits until it gets all 20 results and then displays the 20. With Mongoose Studio, we've actually made it so that we use server sent events to stream the results as they come in. So even though you load 20 at a time, you get kind of like, okay, the instant that this document is available, we stream it to the front end, and the front end gets it. So you kind of see like more of a smooth loading effect. And then there's infinite scroll baked in too. So of course, you want to scroll and view more data, well, you get kind of a smoother experience where you're loading documents one at a time, as opposed to kind of like getting chunks 20, 20, 20. And it really is important, especially in cases where you have a very slow running query, like if you're filtering logs or something like that, where you expect, okay, I may get like 1 or 2 log results really quickly, but then it may take 20 seconds to get all the log results. So it's important to kind of get some of the data first, or get the results as they come in case of long running queries. Server sent events are great for that. Yeah, have you guys been working with Dino or Bun at all?
I haven't. My backend, I generally focus on PHP and Laravel just because that's been, where I started on the server side. So no, I haven't had much opportunity to work with Node or Bun or Dino itself. Like I said, just Mongo in the context of large Laravel view application.
Yeah, and I mostly do Ruby on Rails on the back end. So
yeah, I guess I'm in the minority as someone that does server-side JavaScript pretty much exclusively. And like I describe myself as like a back-end heavy full-stack developer in the sense that in my team we typically focus more on the back end and build decent enough front ends. Our front ends are not our strong suit, but we do them.
Sound like me. Yeah, when it comes to the JavaScript side of things, I'm really good at, if I'm handling data or, communicating with the backend and getting data and displaying in data and that kind of stuff, more of a data management type of application. I'm pretty good. When it comes to the UI and making it really pretty and design and stuff, not so much.
Yeah. Well, these days the AI does a pretty decent job of that. Ish. I think one thing I've seen is that like the AI tools are still not quite as good as people as like experts in that space.
Right.
So like if I build something, if I just have Claude try to one shot something, it's not going to be as good as if the Tailwind guy built some bespoke layout for me. But it'll be probably like 70% as good, and maybe that's good enough.
Yeah, exactly. I've been trying to play around and find some different tools that would be good at creating like a some sort of UI template that I could implement on the front end that at least looks decent and better than what I would come up with on my own.
Cool. Well, is there anything else that we should dive into here?
Well, there was one topic that we wanted to talk about. I mentioned earlier the data API and Cassandra integration.
Oh yeah.
that's something that's interesting. Oh, so yeah, we're for probably the last year or two, we've been working with DataStax, which recently got acquired by IBM, to build a plugin that lets Mongoose talk to DataStax's data API, which is kind of like a HTTP layer on top of Apache Cassandra. So
Yep.
one of the neat things you can do with Mongoose now is you can actually you can actually like just write Mongoose code, drop in a couple of lines of configuration, and have it talk to Apache Cassandra with some asterisks as opposed to for features that aren't quite supported and whatnot. And then other neat things you can do, like Mongoose's populate, which is kind of like Mongoose's application level joins. You can actually use that to take data from MongoDB, populate some data from Cassandra, or vice versa. It's a pretty cool thing, I think.
So for the uninitiated, can you explain what Cassandra is? Because I didn't know myself until I went and looked.
Oh yeah, no, Apache Cassandra is it's a NoSQL database, but quite different from MongoDB in the sense that like it still stores data in what kind of looks like rows and columns, but it is like what's called a wide column store. I think the big selling point for Cassandra is it's good for massive write throughput. Like the big example of probably the biggest Cassandra deployment that I can think of off the top of my head is Apple iCloud. So say every time that you take a photo on your iPhone, the metadata associated with that photo, like who took it, when they took it, that gets dumped into a 250,000, last I checked, node Cassandra cluster, or at least the last time I read about this. Yeah, Apple iCloud is one big deployment. Discord messages for a long time were also in Apache Cassandra, and pretty much like name like a major tech company that's not Google, they probably have a Cassandra deployment. Like Cassandra was actually originally written by Facebook, if memory serves.
Oh,
so they open sourced that abated. I think it was like originally written to as like the backend store for the timeline view. Memory serves. Could be totally wrong there, but
but it sounds like it's not like something used for small apps. It's more of an enterprise, huge implementation type application, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one of the things they're trying, or DataStax has been trying to do, is like make Cassandra more accessible using that data API, and Mongoose is part of that because there's a lot of content out there on how to use Mongoose. So Mongoose kind of like plugs neatly into the DataStax data API, which kind of exposes like a Mongo-like layer on top of Cassandra.
Yeah, I've done a little bit with Cassandra, and it's kind of an interesting setup with the columnar focus and things like that. But
so it's NoSQL because it's not SQL, but it's different than Mongo in terms of how
it's
exactly. Internally.
In the sense that they have they have a language called CQL, Cassandra Query Language, which is similar to SQL, but heavily simplified.
And they, strictly speaking, don't have a rigid schema, kind of like what Mongo does. But yeah, their performance characteristics are different, and they kind of focus in a different way of thinking about your data. So depending on what you're doing, you would pick Cassandra over Mongo. I'm not sure I'm the right person to explain when you would pick one over the other. But
yeah, I think like historically, I'm not sure like how accurate this is right now, but historically it was like if you have for read heavy data or data where you're incrementing a counter or like incrementing data in place, you would probably use MongoDB. And if you have something where you're just writing something as fast as you can, you would use Cassandra. I'm not sure how accurate that is right now, but that tends to be the way that I think about things.
yeah.
Although recently I've also been using Cassandra more, or Data API more, for vector search, because one of the things that I think Cassandra did really well recently is they've taken vector search and made it a part of the like core Cassandra, and now that's exposed through Data API as well. Whereas with MongoDB, it's still like vector search is still like an Atlas only thing. Like if you're running MongoDB by itself locally, you don't get vector search, which is not a complete deal breaker in the sense that, like, yeah, for the most part, you're going to be running production deployments in Atlas. Like even I don't run my own MongoDB clusters anymore. But it does it is a bit of a pain point in terms of local development.
So basically, you can, unless you're like hosting it on Atlas or something like that. At least with
Yeah,
Mongo,
so unless you're
that's the only
hosting
time you
on
get the
Atlas
vector.
or running MongoDB locally via the Atlas CLI. However, like running it locally via the Atlas CLI also comes with caveats and restrictions that you don't have if you're running your own MongoDB locally. So like there's caveats there.
Cool. Well, I've got about 10 minutes before I have to jump off. Are there other things that you guys want to keep talking about, or should we do picks?
But just real quick, the one question I had was, Val, you mentioned at the beginning that you use Vue whenever you have to, whenever you need it, JavaScript front end. So is that just in the UI, or where else do you use Vue, at least with Mongo?
For front-end UIs, either server-side rendering or a single-page app. Another thing that we use Vue for is email templating. Like when we send emails, our email templates are also in Vue.
Oh, okay. You just have use some single-file components that format your email.
Not single-file components. We typically use two file components in the sense that we have JavaScript and HTML. So our emails look more along the lines of there's order confirmation.js and order confirmation.html, and that defines a component that renders our order confirmation email. So like we define the layout in an HTML file. Historically, we found that easier. I have considered switching to single file components in recent years because I thought that like AI could do a better job with single file components, but we're still sticking with the separate JS and HTML files for now. And then just define the emails in HTML because we found like Vue is really good at just V4 things like that, like basic loops, computed properties. That makes email rendering much easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Cool. Well, I'm gonna push us into picks. So Steve, do you want to start us off with picks?
Certainly. Nothing really pick-wise other than the high point of all of our episodes, the dad jokes of the week. So I'll dive right into those real quick. So when I was growing up, one of my favorite memories of my childhood was I used to build sandcastles, with my grandmother. And then my mom took the urn away from me. Right. Sort of like the joke about where I was out washing cars with my son and he's like, "Dad, can we just use a sponge?" But, and then when people say, "You look so familiar, do I know you?" I find that if I say, "Were we in prison together?" really ends the conversation every time. And then finally, I was talking to my insurance agent and I said, "I hit an animal and my car's totaled. Am I covered?" He goes, "Yeah, what'd you hit?" And I said, "A fish." And that joke sort of comes with the car in the water. Maybe it's a little more of a visual joke, but anyway, those are the dad jokes of the week.
All right. I'm going to jump in here with some picks really quickly. So I'm going to pick a game I've been playing a lot lately with my buddies. I know I've picked it before, but I'm just going to pick it again because I didn't have time to look one up. It's called The Gang. You play it in like 15, 20 minutes. It's essentially group poker, like cooperative poker. And so what you do is you have chips that are numbered from 1 to however many players are playing. it has up to 6. And then you deal everybody out their whole cards or their pocket cards, the 2 cards you start with in Texas Hold'em. And then everybody grabs a chip, and you try and get it in order of who has the best hand down to who has the worst hand. And then you flip the flop and you do it again, right? And then you flip the turn, and then you do the same thing, and then you flip the river. And after the river, on the red chips, then whoever has the number 1 chip flips theirs over first. They should have the worst hand. Whoever has the number 2 should have a better hand, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 6. Or if you're only playing with 3 people, all the way up to 3. I was playing this with my kids the other day. And so the only other rule is you can talk about everybody else's hand, but you can't talk about your own. So at one point, for example, we had flipped the turn card, and so which is the 4th card in Texas Hold'em, and it was a 10, and my son grabbed the number 3 chip because there were 3 of us playing, because he, in his whole cards, he had a 10, and so he had a pair of 10s. And so I looked at him and I said, if you matched just now, you have a pair of 10s. And then I grabbed the 3 chip and put it in front of me because I had a pair of jacks from the flop. And so that told so I didn't talk about my hand, but I indicated to him, I know what you have and I have a better hand. And so anyway, so that's kind of the way you do it. If there are more people, you tend to talk through a lot more things. With my buddies, we also like to call out, for example, if you have 2 clubs, then you have a flush, right? Because there are 3 clubs cards in the, in the shared cards. Or if you have a 2 and a 6, then you have a straight, right? Which is run of 5 cards in number order. And so anyway, so it's a lot of fun. And like I said, we just, you can play through pretty quick. You're trying to get 3 correct before you get 3 incorrect. And that's how you win the game. And yeah, like I said, it takes like 20 minutes. So I'm going to pick that for the game. I've also wanted to really quickly, I was texting. I've started this thing where I start texting people that I haven't talked to in a while. And so one person that I texted, let me find the text because I told him I was going to share some stuff. But I was texting with Kent Dodds, and I might just have to search it here.
Wow, talk about name dropping.
Well, he lives out here, and so periodically we'll hang out or whatever.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, so he said that he's been doing a couple of things. So I'm just going to shout out his websites. He has epicai.pro. So he's been teaching people to do AI stuff. He's also got epicweb.dev, which is kind of his full stack preferred stack. And so I don't know if he's still doing Remix, but that used to be a big part of it. And then he had a whole bunch of other stuff that he'd pull in. And then he also has epicreact.dev. So if you're looking to learn stuff about React, JavaScript, or AI, then he's got some resources out there that you can go check out. And I find that his stuff is reasonably easy to follow along with, and so I don't have any problem shouting that out. So I'm doing that, and yeah, I'm also just going to shout out the idea of find 4 people to reach out to every day. I mean, I do it with family members. I do it with people in the tech community. It's kind of fun because sometimes I haven't heard from them in a couple of years. Like I don't think I've really talked to Kent in a couple of years, right? And so it was like, oh hey, and so we're catching up on kids and things like that. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing. And I picked that up from Jordan Harbinger. I was listening to him do an interview with somebody, and he said that he does that, and I was like, there are a lot of people I want to stay connected to that I don't. And so anyway, I'm going to shout that out as well. Val, what are your picks?
I haven't reached out to Jordan. I haven't spoken to him in a few years.
Yeah, I haven't either. Of course, last time I talked to him, I had to drop some money. So
we should get Ken on the podcast again.
We should. I'll ping him and see if he wants to come on. All right, Val, what are your picks?
Yeah, check out Mongoose Studio, mongoosstudio.app. Alicia.js also, aliciajs.com, worth checking out. I
How do you
haven't
spell
actually
that?
taken. It's in the public chat already, but
Oh, is it? Okay. Oh,
ELYSIAJS.com.
Alicia. Okay, yeah,
Let
that's
me see.
right.
Yeah, I told you I was going to butcher the pronunciation, so I'm sorry in advance. I tend to like not listen to video. I tend to read things. So frequently I read things and I just don't know how they're pronounced. Sorry about that. So yeah, that one I haven't actually played with it yet, but it's got some interesting patterns that I think are worth looking into and thinking about, especially related to server sent events. And then, yeah, recently I've been using Todoist a lot more. I've kind of gone back and forth on like different to-do list tools, and I just keep coming back to this one for specifically for like personal tasks. So it's a great replacement for just for like having a to-do.txt or for having sticky notes or something. So I like having kind of like a list of 3 or 4 tasks where like these are the important things I need to get done today, and it can be work related. It can be just like buy a Valentine's Day gift for my wife, which is still on my to-do list right now.
You
So
got a
thanks
couple
for
couple
reminding me.
weeks.
No, about 1 week.
But yeah, just having like a list of things that I want to be front and center. Like these are the things I need to get done. Todoist is a great place for that because they got a great web app, they got a great mobile app, and a nice little simple user interface that encourages you to only have a handful of things on your list. So yeah, it's never going to replace like a Linear or a Jira or something for managing a long backlog of tasks, but it is a good way to just kind of have like a quick sticky notes thing for yourself, just to keep track of important things.
So are you still doing the mastering JS at all? I don't know if I've seen one in a while.
I have been not working on it as much actually. I've been kind of like letting that run because mastering JS was kind of more about like getting like tech tutorial SEO, which is a game that has become very played out in the post AI era. Like people don't go to Google for code questions as much anymore. So
Right.
traffic for that website has fallen substantially since the 2022. Um, yeah, if you saw the Tailwind
Yes.
stuff,
Yeah.
it's not it's fairly
Yeah.
similar in the sense that like with the traffic to mongoosejs.com and masteringJS.io pretty much peaked exactly in August September 2022, and then it's been declined since, which hasn't affected us that much right now. But yeah, we don't really rely on the ad revenue or anything from there. But it's definitely been something that we've noticed and thought about.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Jeffrey Ray is the guy that does Laracast. He put out a video here in the past week or so talking about that and the impact that AI has had on his site and their courses and stuff like that too. It's an interesting listen.
Yeah, the impact of AI on our industry is it's it's still happening. It's huge so far, and it's gonna keep getting bigger. So I honestly, it's a somewhat exciting. It's an exciting but somewhat scary time to be in software engineering because honestly, no idea what our industry is going to look like in 5 years. I agree with
Yeah.
DHH on that assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as someone
Awesome.
who's job hunting right now, I can vouch for that. It's pretty brutal out there.
Yeah. All right, I've got to jump off. I've got a work meeting, but thanks for coming, Val.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chuck. It's always great to see you.
Yeah, you too. And yeah, until next time, folks, max out.